Jody Holmes. The title of her project, which is a research project, is Butterfly Soup, a primer for personal and planetary transformation. Jody grew up on a farm, immersed in nature, and has been in love with the natural world ever since, as well as secretly fascinated by the world of magic and miracles. Jody received a PhD in biology from the University of British Columbia, and for the last 15 years, she has worked on major environmental campaigns throughout British Columbia. Most recently, she worked as a senior scientist, negotiator, and strategist on the Great Bear Rainforest Campaign, which is internationally recognized as a model of cooperative negotiation and decision-making. And that has resulted in an area the size of Belgium being protected. Yes. Jody was also an activist, trainer, and coach for 10 years at the Hollyhock Leadership Institute. She is passionate about learning, whole systems thinking, and working at the interface between head and heart. She lives on a remote island with her 5-year-old daughter and dreams of biodynamic farming. Jody. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if I get to have Jan's extra 2 minutes. All right, Catherine, can we have the first slide, please? Oh, we got to go back quite a ways from there. Okay, you've had your preview now. All right. As Chiyomi said, I come from an activist background, an academic background, and also from a place of very great love for this planet. And as an activist coming to this school, I've been sitting at this interface. Remember, I'm pretty interested in interfaces. This interface between science, head kind of stuff, a lot of very sort of action-oriented negotiation kind of things, and more ephemeral school-related things. And this project for me is kind of the culmination of that creative tension that for me I've been sitting with for 4 years between the world that I'm in out there as an activist and this world that I enter when I come to the school. So, without further ado, I'm going to just have the next slide, please. I'm going to just do a very quick overview of the genesis of this project. Then we're going to talk briefly about the purpose, the hypotheses, research methods, the results, and the conclusion. Next slide, please. I thought a lot about how to give you guys a sense of the arc that I came on through this project, and I decided that the simplest way to do it is actually through an experiential. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes right now, and I'm going to just throw some images up here. And this is the place that I started from with this project, and I imagine that a few of us actually hold some of these kind of images and these fears internally. We may hold them in shadow, but I just want us to just sit for a moment with this set of images, and I want you to just track your field and see what happens in your field. So, there's a lot of hype out there about 2012. There's the world's gonna end hype, and there's the it's gonna be an amazing new future. I don't know about anybody else. I discovered for myself that I was kind of trending towards the, oh my God, what's gonna happen in 2012? I actually made a choice to come to this school and be finished before 2012. And I did much of this subconsciously. I didn't really realize I was doing it, but I was. And the funny thing is I've talked to a lot of people here, and a lot of people kind of have the same stuff secretly. So, there's this whole idea that the world is gonna end, right? Or something really terrible is gonna happen. Feel what happens in your field with that. Can we have the next slide? Lots of catastrophic imagery out there. Next slide, please. And then sort of layered on top of the 2012 piece is what's happening to the natural world, what's happening with poverty, what's happening with hunger and starvation and inequity all through the world. And I want everyone to just sit for a moment and feel into what that does to us. Can you feel the kind of contraction that happens? How we sort of shut things down a little bit? I don't know about everyone out there, but I know what happens for me is I numb a little bit, and I get quite scared. And the first thing I want to do is skits out and just not have any part of it. But the thing is, can I have the next slide, please? I came here. And while skitzing out was sort of an option the first year, it's not really an option anymore. So, again, there's this piece around reality as it exists seemingly out in the world, and there's a lot of scary looking stuff out there about what's happening to our planet and our future. And then there's the world that we enter when we come to this school. And for 2 or 3 years, I used to feel like I was completely split. I would go out and I would work in my activist world, and you know, it was all crisis. It was a crisis, and everything was going wrong, and it was all a matter of like trying to save the last little bits. And then I would come back here, and it wasn't like that at all. But I want you to just sit for a moment and think about, no matter where you are in the school right now, just think about that feeling that you had the first time you sat down in this big class auditorium and you looked around and you saw all these people and you realized that there were other people that kind of had this secret dream that you had about being a healer. And think about what that does to your field. Feel what that does to your field. So this project for me birthed out of that arc, that place of fear and terror and concern and love for this planet that we call home, and this place of learning to be a healer, and what does it mean to be a healer, and for me in particular, what does it mean to practice healing at the scale of the planet. Next slide, please. And being me, I started with some questions, which I have been holding for 4 years, and so they all kind of coalesced together. And the first question for me really was this basic question of, is there any hope for us? Is there any hope for this planet? Do we need to just kind of walk down the road of it's all bad and that's where we're going? Or is there a way to create a different future for this planet? And if so, how? Next slide. Just quickly. Yeah, thank you. So the course of answering that question took me down a series of other questions. So I'm just going to take you through the series of questions that I asked, because questions for me are actually a very important part of the process. So the first question that came up for me is, so if I'm thinking about how do we create a different future, how do we create? How do we make physical realities happen? And most particularly, how do we make miracles happen? Because it seems like planetarily, that's what we need right now. If you buy the line that we're all going to hell in a handbasket, which we're not necessarily, but if you did, we need a miracle. Next, please. Then, how do we as individuals actually interact with that? Because I don't know about any of you, but a lot of the time I think it's pretty big. That's a lot to take on as an individual. So is there anything we can do as individuals to interact with that directly? Next, please. And then what is the appropriate healing response to this seemingly catastrophic environmental degradation, poverty, wars, all the rest of it? What's the appropriate healing response at the scale of the planet? How do we hold that as healers? Next, please. And then because I happen to come from the environmental movement, I turned the lens back in on the group of people that I work with and said, and how does that healing response that we sort of potentially know about as Brennan healing science practitioners, how does that compare to what is being done currently by the environmental movement? You know, the vanguards of we're gonna save the world, we're gonna change all of this. How does it compare to what they do? Next, please. And this particular question, I just keep holding, and just by asking the question, it keeps sort of percolating and creating kind of new avenues of discovery for me. It's this piece around, we lay hands on an individual, and we all kind of know how to do that, but how do we, or is it possible to scale that, what we know on the personal level, up to the planetary level? So, started with questions. Next, please. And I just want to make a quick note about questions because they are critical, in my mind, for transformation. It's not about knowing the right answer, always. It's about finding the right questions to ask. And in the course of this project, what I've discovered is the question, what if, completely transforms how we think about things and how we hold things in our consciousness. So I invite you to, throughout this conversation, because this will be kind of a conversation energetically, to keep holding that question in your mind. Next slide. So we call it butterfly soup, and you're like, why? Why are we calling it butterfly soup? There's this point when the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and hangs out there, where it all breaks down, and it's just soup. And it's all unformed soup. Has no idea about being a caterpillar or a butterfly. And then, in that soup, what happens are these little cells, and they're quite small, dotted throughout the soup, start popping up, and they're called imaginal cells. And imaginal cells hold the dream of a butterfly. And they get attacked by all the others, sort of blah, and they might get broken down 3 or 4 times, but they keep coming back, and they keep holding the vision of the butterfly. And eventually, the whole soup aligns itself with them. Next, please. Oh, we've got, okay, you guys are going to get this really well, just through the experiential. So, purpose, I want to inspire and activate people to learn how to use their own consciousness to change the world. Next, please. My hypothesis is basically that we as individuals have great capacity to change the world and to change our planetary outcomes and futures. And the way we do it is through our consciousness and how we hold it. And we hold both great distortions in our consciousness that are actually part of the problem and are helping to create a negative planetary future. And we hold really great positive essence in ourselves that can create something much different. Next slide, please. I did a research project. Actually, can you just flip through this one, because this one, in fact, is going to be in next steps. Next, please. Thank you. Research project I did 3 things. I took a look at the kinds of paradigms that define our global consciousness and compared them and how to look at which worked better in terms of thinking about positive planetary futures. I did 3 case studies, looking particularly at the environmental movement, and then I developed a healing protocol, a one-on-one healing protocol to do personal planetary transformation directly in individual healings. Next slide, please. And the next one. Next. My favorite guy, Albert Einstein. Problem can't be solved at the same level that it's created. So from a paradigm perspective, we need to shift the way we think about the world. Next slide, and the next one, please. Big difference between 2 different ways of thinking about the world. In one, there's matter, and it creates thoughts, and it creates consciousness. In the other, there's consciousness, and it creates reality. And in that way of looking at the world, how we believe the future is, how we are conscious about the future, makes a huge difference. Next slide, please. And next, and next, and next. Why is it that we can't just make the future beautiful and brilliant just as it is? Simple fact, 5% of our mind, generally speaking, is conscious, 95% is subconscious. We gotta work on the subconscious stuff. That's why we're here at school, to do that stuff, because that subconscious stuff is doing a lot of creating in the world right now. So we need to work that piece. Next slide. To create a positive planetary future, there's a step-by-step guide. These are all pieces we know from school. At the personal level, we need to activate our witness, deal with our shadow and our subconscious, create some positive intentionality. And then we need to, at the planetary level, visualize and connect in with the positive planetary future, intend for it, relax, and allow it to happen, not will it to happen, and then connect with others and create harmonic induction. Does that make sense? Can you flip 5 slides? Sorry, next. 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 It's gonna be here. 2 more, I think then we're there. So, what if the planet could hold a miraculous recovery? And what if our consciousness was key? What is it that each of us as individuals wants to do to make that happen? Consciousness is key. How we hold our belief about it is key. Next slide, please. And the final slide. That says, I love those who yearn for the impossible.